Tonight, we're traveling somewhere far, not across oceans, but across centuries. If you've ever dreamed of stepping into the past, this story is your guide. A quiet survival manual for anyone bold enough to time travel into medieval Europe. Forget the castles and crowns. For now, we're talking about the real world that existed behind them. The freezing stone rooms, the muddy roads, the strange smells, and the endless noise of daily life that never seemed to stop. So, if you ever find yourself waking up in the 14th century, this might be the advice that keeps you alive, and maybe even a little bit comfortable. Now, before we begin, tell me, which city are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Imagine this. You open your eyes, and the first thing you see is smoke, thick, gray, and heavy, with the smell of burning wood and wet straw. You're lying on a pile of hay. The air is damp, your throat stings, and a rooster is screaming somewhere far too close to your ear. You've done it. Somehow, you've time traveled to medieval Europe. But before you can even think about exploring, you need to survive your first day. The air of the Middle Ages was not kind. Cities smelled of waste, wood smoke, and sweat. Open sewers ran down the center of most streets, carrying human and animal waste side by side. If you were unlucky enough to land in London or Paris, the stench alone could knock you unconscious. People tried to cover it with herbs or incense, but the smell of survival always won. Even in noble homes, rushes on the floor were rarely changed. Months of food scraps, bones, and worse lay rotting underneath them. When you walked, the floor actually crunched. So the first thing to remember, breathe shallowly, and never remove your handkerchief from your nose for too long. It might look clear, but that medieval river is a deadly trap. The Thames, the Seine, even the quiet streams of the countryside, they all carried disease, laundry, animal waste, dead fish, and even bodies could be floating downstream. People knew, in a vague way, that something about the water made them sick, so they drank ale instead. Weak, slightly sour, but safe. Even children had ale at breakfast. If you're in a monastery, you'll get watered-down wine. If you're a peasant, expect a cloudy, lukewarm drink that tastes faintly of bread. If you find yourself thirsty, look for a local tavern. The alewife, a woman brewer, might be your best friend. Her home-brewed ale could save your life. Your modern clothes will get you killed faster than any sword. Wool and linen are the fabric of this world. Everything else will look like sorcery. If you're seen wearing bright colors, embroidery, or anything that glitters, you'll be noticed. And being noticed in the Middle Ages is never good. If you arrive in a town, head straight for the market. Look for second-hand clothes. Peasants often sold what they could spare. Find a tunic, some rough trousers, maybe a cloak if it's winter. Hide your shoes. Medieval ones are thin leather or wooden clogs. If you're lucky enough to be mistaken for a pilgrim, even better. Pilgrims could travel freely. People might even feed you for free. Just remember to keep your story simple. Say you're walking to Canterbury, or Rome, or Santiago de Compostela. No one will question it. In medieval Europe, your accent can be as dangerous as a sword. Every village, every region spoke its own dialect. Latin was for priests and scholars, French for nobility, and English for peasants, though even then, English itself changed from county to county. So, until you learn enough to understand the rhythm of their speech, keep quiet, nod politely, smile when others smile. The less you speak, the less suspicious you'll seem. And whatever you do, never mention anything that sounds like witchcraft or prophecy. If you accidentally talk about the future, you might not survive to see tomorrow. Medieval meals were a strange balance of hunger and ritual. Breakfast barely existed. Lunch, called dinner then, was served around noon, and supper came before sunset. If you find yourself among peasants, expect bread, onions, and pottage, a thick soup made from grains, cabbage, and whatever scraps of meat or beans were available. If you're with nobles, the food will be fancier, but no cleaner. Dishes are covered in spices to hide the taste of rot. Whatever you eat, never refuse what's offered. Hospitality was sacred. Refusing a meal could be seen as an insult or even a sign that you're cursed. In this century, the cure is often worse than the illness. If you catch a fever, you'll likely be bled, literally drained of blood with a knife or leech. If your head aches, they might burn herbs inside your skull. And if you're unlucky enough to get the plague, well, best to find a quiet corner and pray. But don't despair entirely. Apothecaries and monks sometimes offered remedies that worked: honey for wounds, vinegar for cleaning, and herbs like sage and thyme for infection. The challenge is finding someone who knows the difference between healing and superstition. Religion ruled every breath of life. Bells marked the hours, priests marked your sins, and the church marked the seasons. But behind every chapel door, politics brewed, the kind that could end your life. If you're caught questioning the church's authority, you'll be labeled a heretic. If you stay too quiet, people might assume you're hiding something. The safest path: go to Mass, bow your head, and say little. Cross yourself when others do. Faith in the Middle Ages was as much survival as belief. The sun, if you can call it that, rises like a pale coin through a sky the color of ash. You've survived the night. The straw you slept on itched like nettles, and rats rustled in the dark, but you made it. You're still alive, though you smell a bit like smoke, sweat, and the damp of centuries. You stretch your arms, and the joints crack. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls, not the clear metallic chime of modern clocks, but a deep, uneven clang from a crooked tower. It's the sound that divides this world into time itself. 1 bell for dawn, 3 for the first Mass, 6 forenoon. No watches, no hours, only bells, birds, and hunger to mark the day. Welcome to the rhythm of medieval Europe. Here, time isn't something you measure. It's something that happens to you. The church bells control everything when people eat, pray, work, and sleep. Farmers rise when it's light enough to see the furrows in the earth. Bakers wake in the black of night to heat their clay ovens. Monks divide their days into endless circles of prayer, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, an exhausting rhythm that leaves no silence, only duty. And for everyone else, time is simply before the bell and after the bell. No one asks, what time is it? They ask, how far is the sun? You might think of medieval Europe as vast, endless forests, distant kingdoms, but for most people, the world ends at the edge of their village. A peasant might never travel more than 10 miles from where they were born. The next village is another world, its dialect strange, its customs suspicious. Outsiders are watched. Foreigners are feared. So, if you wander too far, people will notice. If you must travel, walk slowly. Keep your head low. Carry a staff and a pouch. It helps people believe you're a pilgrim or messenger. Stay near monasteries or inns when possible. They're the medieval version of safe zones. But if night falls and you're still on the road, that's where the real danger begins. There are no streetlights in this century. When the sun goes down, the world belongs to shadows. Even cities fall silent after dusk. Gates close and guards patrol the walls. Anyone found outside without permission might be taken for a thief, or worse, a spy. Inside homes, light comes from tallow candles, cheap ones made of animal fat that sputter and smell of burnt meat. Only the rich can afford beeswax, whose clean golden glow seems almost holy by comparison. If you find yourself alone on a country road, remember this. People in this time believe in things that lurk beyond the light. Spirits, fairies, demons, and the church, too, warns of the devil walking in the dark. So if you must walk, whisper a prayer. Keep close to walls, or sleep beneath a hedge. Better to wake with dew on your hair than to never wake at all. Books are rare, and words are power. In this world, only monks, priests, and a few merchants can truly read. The rest live by symbols. A tavern sign shaped like a boot, a cross scratched into a door, a pattern woven into a cloak that says what kind of person you are. If you see a red cross painted on a door, walk away. It marks plague inside. If you see a sprig of herbs hung above a lintel, it's a charm for protection. If a woman wears her hair loose after marriage, something's wrong, or she's in mourning. Every gesture means something. Every silence, too. You must learn to understand what people never say, because here, words can kill. If you find a coin in your pocket, don't expect it to mean what you think it does. Money in medieval Europe is a labyrinth. A single kingdom can have dozens of currencies, pennies, groats, florins, ducats, each with different silver content, each worth more or less, depending on where you stand. Most people don't even use coins. They trade. A chicken for a loaf of bread. A day's labor for a handful of grain. Credit, in the medieval sense, means trust, not interest, not banks. If you want to pay for something, let the other person name the price first, and never flash gold or silver. A man seen with coins in his hand may not live long enough to spend them. By mid-morning, you'll be hungry again. But food here is not constant. It's survival. Wheat, oats, and barley form the base of everything. Bread isn't soft or white. It's brown, dense, and sometimes full of grit from the millstones that ground the grain. Cheese smells sharp and old. Meat is a luxury. If you find yourself in a village during harvest season, you might be fed well, apples, cabbages, ale. But if you arrive in winter, hunger stalks every doorway. Families stretch their stores of salted pork and dried peas, praying spring will come before starvation. People in this world know what it means to be hungry in a way you never have. And if famine hits, which it often does, they'll eat bark, roots, or even the leather from old shoes. So if you ever find yourself sharing a crust of bread with a stranger, know that in that moment, you're sharing life itself. Even if you stay clean, which is hard enough, disease will find you. Fleas and lice are a fact of life. Every bed is shared, every garment unwashed for weeks. Bathing is rare. Some believe hot water opens the pores to disease. Leprosy, plague, dysentery, and fever haunt. There are no antibiotics, no sanitation, no safety net. If you fall ill, you'll rely on what little people understand, superstition mixed with herbs. You might be told to sleep with garlic under your pillow, to bleed out the bad humors, or to carry a posy of flowers to ward off miasma. And yet, even among this darkness, there's quiet wisdom. Monks record remedies in secret manuscripts. Women healers, often midwives, pass recipes in whispers, honey salves, vinegar washes, the use of willow bark for pain. Their knowledge will one day shape medicine itself, though, in their time, they are often condemned as witches. At midday, you might hear chanting low, rhythmic, echoing through stone. It's the monks calling prayers across time. Religion is not a choice here. It is the air people breathe. Every illness, every storm, every birth is seen as divine will. Saints are prayed to for everything: lost objects, sore throats, safe childbirth. Relics, a saint's bone, a scrap of cloth, are carried as protection. But behind the devotion is fear. Hellfire is preached with precision. Every soul is guilty, every pleasure a temptation. The Church offers salvation, but only through obedience. If you doubt too openly, you could vanish, accused of heresy, tortured, or burned. So even if your modern mind rebels, keep your tongue still. Let your silence be your faith. In this world, identity is not something you choose. You are born into your labor, and your place in society is fixed like mortar in stone. Peasants work the land. Smiths hammer iron. Millers grind the grain. A rare few merchants, craftsmen might climb higher, but never far. Nobles rule, priests bless, kings command. If you're clever, you might find a way to pass as a traveling scholar or a scribe, jobs that require little explanation and grant some protection. Carry a bit of parchment and a quill, and people will assume you belong somewhere important. But remember this: every man and woman you meet carries centuries of toil in their hands. Calluses, scars, cracked skin, these are their signatures. In this world, work is prayer made visible. After sunset, when the bells stop and even dogs grow quiet, you'll hear something rare: stillness. No hum of electricity, no engines, no distant traffic. Only the crackle of a dying fire and the slow breathing of those around you. In that silence, you might feel the strange closeness of the medieval night. It's peaceful, but also heavy. The stars seem closer, the darkness thicker. Time feels slower here. Not a line, but a circle that keeps turning, century after century. And for a moment, you might realize something unsettling. Though everything looks different, the people here, the tired mother, the worried farmer, the apprentice falling asleep over his work, they are not strangers at all. They are you, just born in another time. You wake before dawn again. The faint light seeps through the cracks in the shutters, gray and hesitant. There is no rush of morning here, no alarm, no hum of life beyond the walls, only the slow creaking sound of wood contracting in the cold. Outside, the air tastes of smoke. Not clean smoke, but that earthy, bitter kind, the sort that clings to wool and hair and never truly leaves you. Every household burns something different: peat, straw, old wood, sometimes even dung. You can tell who lives where by the scent that drifts from their chimney. And so, your second morning in this strange, distant time begins, much as it must have for millions who came before you in cold breath and aching silence. In the Middle Ages, silence never lasts long. The world wakes with a rhythm of tools. The blacksmith's hammer rings in uneven intervals, each strike echoing across the narrow streets. Somewhere nearby, a woman beats cloth against a stone by the river, her rhythm steady as a heartbeat. A cart creaks past, its wooden wheels groaning under a weight of grain. The world is smaller here, but louder, alive with the clatter of necessity. Every sound you hear is a person surviving. The baker's whistle means the oven's ready. The church bell means prayer. The shout from the watchtower means someone has seen a stranger. There are no idle noises, no music unless someone is celebrating, no laughter unless it's earned. Even the birds seem to sing in labor. In this world, every sound costs something. If you try to speak, you'll quickly discover that words are a kind of trap. Medieval Europe is not one tongue, it's hundreds, splintered and uneven. French in one valley, a different French in the next. English still half Norse, half Latin. Italian not yet born, but forming in the mouths of traders and monks. Even if you know modern English, it will not help you much here. Your words sound strange, your accent foreign, your tone suspicious. People will look at you sideways. So you'll need to listen. Watch how they point when they talk, how they draw shapes in the air. Notice that greetings change with class. A peasant bows with the eyes, a noble with the shoulders, a monk not at all. In this world, language is not what you say, it's how still you can stay while saying nothing. Walk through the narrow lanes of a medieval town and you'll notice something unsettling. The buildings lean inward, as if eavesdropping. Their wooden beams are blackened by smoke and rain, their windows small and uneven. Every wall here remembers something: laughter, death, a prayer whispered before a raid. The plaster is rough, made of lime and hair, sometimes mixed with ashes. When you touch it, you feel centuries of hands before yours. People don't build for beauty, they build for endurance. Each stone, each nail, is a defense against time itself. You might pass under an archway where a merchant once traded spices, or walk down an alley once flooded with blood during a plague. No one speaks of it. They don't need to. The stones already do. If sound is life here, smell is its shadow. The streets reek of humanity, not just dirt, but existence itself. Rotting vegetables from the market, ale spilled on stone, animal dung, tallow smoke, sweat, and underneath it all, the faint metallic trace of blood. The butcher's quarter smells different from the tanner's. The tanner's soak hides in urine to soften them, and the stench clings to everything. Even the river nearby runs dark and foul. The only clean air you'll find is inside the church, where incense burns to mask the scent of mortality. Frankincense, myrrh, and candle wax, sweet and strange, like holiness trying to cover decay. If you ever get lost, follow your nose. The air tells you where you are. Thirst will come sooner than you expect. But here, water is not to be trusted. Rivers are lifelines, yes, but also sewers. Everything, blood, filth, ashes, waste, ends up in them. Even wells can be poisoned by the town above. People drink ale, cider, or thin wine instead, even children. It's not about indulgence, it's about safety. Fermentation kills what water keeps. If you must drink water, find it at dawn, far upstream, before the towns wake. Or draw from the rain, clean, cold, and brief. It is said that those who drink from the wrong stream grow sick within a day. Some die by nightfall, others simply fade. In this time, dying of thirst isn't about lack of water, it's about trusting the wrong drop. Everything you wear means something. Wool, heavy and scratchy, is for the common folk. Linen, soft and fine, marks status. Silk, rare and shimmering, marks sin, at least according to the sermons. You might notice that people wear the same garments for weeks, even months. Washing is dangerous in winter, when water freezes and damp cloth can kill. Soap is expensive, often made from animal fat and ash. Every layer tells a story, the apron stained with flour, the cloak patched with old sleeves, the shoes hardened from years of wear. Clothing is not fashion, it's memory stitched into fabric. If you wish to blend in, wear brown or gray. Bright colors draw eyes, and eyes draw questions. You might assume justice is slow here. It isn't. It's immediate, physical, and public. Disputes are settled in markets. Thieves are nailed by the ear to posts. Debt is not erased by time. It becomes your life's definition. Trial by ordeal is still common. Plunge your hand into boiling water, and if you heal cleanly, God has declared you innocent. You can even swear innocence while holding hot iron. Your pain becomes proof of truth. But for most crimes, it's not about guilt, it's about reputation. A good word from a priest or lord might save you. A whisper from a rival might doom you. So if you're wronged, remember this: truth doesn't win. Favor does. You cannot escape its shadow. The church is the calendar, the courthouse, the hospital, and the school. It marks the rhythm of time and the boundaries of belief. Every Sunday, the bells call even the unwilling to Mass. You kneel, you confess, you listen, and the priest speaks not to you, but through you, as if your life is merely a thread in a great divine tapestry. Tithes are mandatory, 1/10 of your income, no matter how small. Refuse, and your crops might fail. Refuse again, and you risk your soul. Yet, strangely, the church also preserves what would otherwise be lost. In cold scriptoria, monks bend over parchment, copying words they barely understand, ancient texts from Greece and Rome, bits of poetry, medicine, astronomy. They keep knowledge alive through darkness, never knowing that centuries later you will call it a rebirth. When the last bell fades and the fire burns low, the world turns inward. People whisper stories before sleep, not for comfort, but protection. Tales of saints, miracles, curses. The line between prayer and spell is thin. You'll hear talk of willow, the wisps, ghost lights that lure travelers into bogs, of wolves that walk upright on two legs, of women who know herbs too well and vanish by dawn. If you see a charm above a doorway, bones, feathers, a braided string, don't laugh. It's a plea for mercy from a world that knows too well how fragile it is. The night here is not a metaphor. It's a living thing, ancient, heavy, filled with unseen eyes. If you want to understand the medieval world, visit the market. It's not just trade, it's community. Here, farmers barter grain for cloth, cobblers mend boots, while gossip travels faster than news. Every transaction carries meaning, the tone of a haggle, the tilt of a head, the trust of a handshake. Coins clink rarely. More often, it's trade in kind, a handful of eggs for a spool of thread, a promise of help at harvest for a loaf of bread. The market smells of hay, sweat, and smoked meat. You'll hear every language at once, from Latin chants to low jokes, and in the center, always, stands the church, watching, counting, reminding everyone who truly owns the time they live in. After sunset, as the fires dim and the air grows colder, you might wonder, how did people live like this? But they did, not because they had no choice, but because they believed. In heaven, in the saints, in tomorrow. Every prayer, every harvest, every moment of laughter was a rebellion against despair. And maybe that's the truest lesson of all, that even in the hardest centuries, people still sang, loved, dreamed, and carried on. They were tired, yes, hungry, yes, but they were alive, and that was enough. You lie awake under your coarse blanket, listening to the soft breath of sleeping strangers. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then stops. The embers glow faintly, and for a moment you forget the centuries that divide you from this world. You're just another soul, waiting for dawn. And as your eyes close, one last question lingers, quiet as the turning of the earth. If you could stay here forever, would you? The days in medieval Europe begin to blur together, not because nothing happens, but because everything happens slowly. The rhythm of life here doesn't rush. It circles, turning in quiet, predictable loops. You can measure time not by hours, but by habits, by when the baker lights his oven, when the church bell calls for noon prayer, when smoke begins to curl above the roofs at dusk. For the traveler who stays long enough, these loops become the heartbeat of existence. You stop expecting change and start noticing the details within the sameness. If there's one thing you'll learn quickly, it's that warmth is survival. A spark is wealth. A flame is life. Every home guards its fire as jealously as a lord guards his coin. It's kept alive through the night, hidden under ashes, so it doesn't die while people sleep. In the morning, someone, often the youngest or the oldest, kneels to coax it back to life. There are no matches, no lighters, no comfort in convenience. Fire is borrowed from neighbors if it goes out. Sometimes, whole families walk through the streets at dawn with a single ember cradled in a clay pot, covered with moss to keep it alive. You begin to understand why people call it the hearth. It's not just a place in the home, it is the home. Without it, walls are just walls. Forget solitude. In this world, you are never alone. Families sleep in the same room, sometimes even in the same bed. Children pressed between parents like layers of warmth. Servants lie near the doorway, animals in the corners. You hear every breath, every rustle, every murmur in the dark. Bathing is public, work is shared, even sickness is communal. If someone coughs, everyone listens. If someone laughs, everyone knows why. Privacy is not a right here. It's a fantasy. The idea of a personal life has not been invented yet. People live as part of a unit, family, village, guild, faith. To separate yourself is to risk vanishing from existence. If you come from the modern world, where silence is choice and walls are thick, You'll find this intimacy both comforting and unbearable. You'll long for space, but find that loneliness here feels colder than the wind. When you finally sit to eat, you'll realize that meals here are less about flavor and more about survival. Bread is everything, dense, coarse, often sour, from the same yeast used for generations. The wealthy eat white bread made from fine flour, but for most people, it's brown or black, heavy as stone. Soup or pottage is constant, a slow-boiled mix of grains, herbs, and whatever scraps are found that day. Salt is a luxury, meat a festival. Most days, you'll eat vegetables grown near home, dried beans, maybe some cheese if it's been a good month. And yet, meals aren't miserable. They're sacred. Each bite begins with a prayer. Each loaf is shared. Knives are personal treasures carried at the belt. Plates are wooden. Hands do most of the work. And when someone offers you the last crust, it's not politeness, it's faith in generosity. You start to see that food isn't about taste here. It's about gratitude for another day survived, for another hunger kept at bay. The air here feels heavy, not just with smoke or dirt, but with sickness. You cough from the soot that never clears. You itch from the wool that never quite dries. Water, as you already know, can kill. And medicine, it's a strange blend of hope, herbs, and superstition. The village healer might carry bundles of dried plants and mutter prayers in Latin. You'll see leeches kept in glass jars, blood drawn to balance the humors, and poultices made from honey and ash. Some cures work, most don't, but belief itself becomes medicine. Monks keep gardens of healing herbs, sage for throat, mint for the stomach, lavender for sleep. They copy medical texts by candlelight, blending ancient Greek wisdom with Christian faith. Still, a fever can end a life in days. A cut can turn black. A cough can spread like wildfire through a village. The most powerful medicine is rest, and that's a luxury few can afford. In your world, time is a number. Here, it's a rhythm. There are no clocks in peasant homes, only the bells. The church dictates the flow of life, prime, terce, sext. Hours are measured not by precision, but by purpose. The sun decides when you wake and when you sleep. The moon decides when you plant and when you harvest. The seasons are not background, they are law. In winter, days vanish into darkness. In summer, light lingers until nearly midnight. You begin to lose your sense of modern time. You stop checking the hour in your head and start feeling it in your bones. The body becomes a sundial. There's a strange peace in this slowness, an ancient kind of patience. In medieval life, every creature has a purpose. Dogs guard, cats hunt vermin, horses labor until they collapse. There's affection, yes, but not sentiment. Animals are respected, but not romanticized. They exist in the same fragile balance as people, needed, used, sometimes worshipped, sometimes feared. If a cat wanders into your home, you'll thank it for killing rats. If it dies, you'll bury it quietly, then go back to work. In some towns, animals are even tried for crimes. A pig that kills a child may be executed publicly. A rooster punished for laying an egg, a sign, they say, of witchcraft. To the medieval mind, the world is moral, but not kind. Even nature must answer for its deeds. When night falls, the world becomes smaller. the fire in your hearth fades, and the only other light comes from candles, small, flickering, precious. Most candles are made of tallow, their smoke greasy and sharp. Beeswax, clean and golden, is rare and reserved for churches and nobles. You understand how truly dark the world can be. The kind of dark that swallows faces, that hums with the sound of unseen life. Every flame becomes holy. You watch it as if it were alive, a trembling sun in miniature, holding back the void. When someone says, "Light a candle for me," it means something deeper than prayer. It means they want to be remembered against the darkness. Rain isn't just an inconvenience here, it's destiny. Too much and crops rot. Too little and famine comes. Winters freeze not only rivers but trade, communication, hope. You'll see people watching the sky with quiet desperation. Priests bless fields, peasants whisper charms, merchants calculate profit by the color of clouds. A cold spring might mean an empty stomach next year. A single storm might erase a village's work. Every life depends on the moods of a sky no one can control. And still they bow their heads and say, "God willing." Traveling in medieval Europe is not adventure, it's peril. The roads are little more than ruts in the mud, lined with thieves, stray dogs, and worse. The forests are deep, ancient, and filled with whispers. Bridges are rare, ferries unreliable. Most people never travel more than 20 miles from where they were born. Those who do are pilgrims, traders, or soldiers, people with either faith or nothing left to lose. If you must travel, join a caravan, carry a staff, sleep near the fire, never walk alone after dusk. The road is a test of endurance, not curiosity, and yet, when you finally glimpse the spire of a distant town, rising like a promise above the fields, you'll understand why some kept walking. Despite the hardship, the filth, and the hunger, beauty still survives here. You see it in the woven patterns of a peasant's cloak, in the way sunlight passes through a stained glass window, scattering color onto stone, in the careful carvings on a church door made by hands that never signed their name. Art is not luxury, it's endurance, a quiet rebellion against decay. When life is uncertain, the smallest creation, a song, a carving, a flower pressed into parchment, becomes proof that someone was here. You stand in a crowded square, watching villagers gossip, merchants haggle, priests chant, and you realize something strange. No one knows they're in the Middle Ages. No one thinks they're living in history. They think they're modern, living in the peak of human civilization, just as you do now. It makes you wonder how your own world will look centuries from now, when someone else looks back and calls it ancient. The thought is humbling and oddly comforting. At last, the day comes when you must return. The modern world calls you back with its speed and light and comfort. But as you walk away from the smoke, the bells, and the muddy lanes, you carry something invisible with you, a silence that hums, an understanding too deep for words. You've seen a world stripped of illusion, where life means labor, faith means survival, and time itself feels heavy enough to touch. You know now that history isn't just written in books. It's breathed in kitchens, whispered in prayers, buried in the soil beneath every forgotten village. And in the soft crackle of your own electric light, you close your eyes. The air smells of smoke and frost. The bells toll somewhere far away, and as you drift toward sleep, one last question lingers, faint and steady as candlelight. If you could travel back again, not as a visitor, but as one of them, would you survive? Or would you simply stay? When you first arrived in medieval Europe, everything felt foreign. The smells, the cold, the closeness of other people. But after some time, months, maybe years, the strangeness begins to fade. You stop noticing the smoke in your clothes, the uneven roads, the weight of silence after sundown. Now, you live inside the rhythm. You've learned that survival here is not a matter of luck, but of obedience to time, to faith, to weather, to hierarchy. Everything that happens does so slowly. The world changes, not by invention, but by repetition. If you wish to endure, you must become part of that stillness, not fighting the age, but bending to it, the way grass bends under frost. In medieval Europe, hunger is not a question of if, but when. Every year carries the shadow of famine, a cold whisper behind even the best harvests. Grain stores rot, weather shifts, wars trample the fields. If you live among peasants, you'll learn the art of preservation. Every crop is used twice, once for eating, once for surviving the winter. Beans are dried, cabbages salted, fruits turned into preserves with honey. Bread is baked hard enough to last weeks. Cheese is hung high to age slowly. Meat, if you ever see it, is smoked until it tastes of fire itself. A peasant's hands know more about food security than a king's council. They can tell the coming of hunger by the smell of rain, by the weight of the wind, by how many worms live in the wheat. When the lean months come, when the snow turns, the world silent and hard, the villagers grow thin but quiet. They chew dried peas and stale bread. They warm their hands over a dying fire. And when someone says, "At least the candles still burn," it means they still have hope. Summer may belong to kings, but winter belongs to no one. In January, the land falls into a kind of sleep, and so do its people. Days are short, nights endless. The air in homes freezes your breath to the rafters. Animals are brought indoors, huddled beside humans for warmth. The walls weep moisture. The roof cracks. Every sound feels heavy, distant. You wake before dawn, not to work, but to pray that the frost doesn't take your crops or your life. Work slows to what can be done by hand indoors, mending tools, spinning wool, weaving, repairing what the summer broke. Men carve, women sew, children gather twigs for fuel. The world contracts to a single room, lit by the faint breath of fire. And outside, wolves cry across the frozen fields. You begin to understand why medieval people feared winter, not as a season, but as a punishment. After a while, you stop counting funerals. Infants die before names are learned. Women die giving life. Men vanish under plagues, wars, or accidents so common they barely earn a prayer. Death isn't tragic here, it's expected. People speak of it with calm practicality. They dig graves while telling stories. They hang black cloth at doors and still bake bread the next day. The church bells toll so often you begin to mistake them for time itself. But there's a strange comfort in it too. Death gives meaning to every act, every loaf baked, every field plowed, every candle lit becomes a quiet act of defiance. People here live not to avoid death, but to make their brief days matter, even if that meaning vanishes, unrecorded. You start to see why they build cathedrals that take generations to finish, not because they expect to see the end, but because they believe someone will. The church is not a building here, it's the air everyone breathes. Every morning begins with a bell, every decision ends with a prayer. From birth to death, you belong to the rhythm of religion. If you sin, you confess. If you're sick, you're blessed. If the harvest fails, it's because God willed it. You kneel not only to pray, but to exist. And yet, faith is more than obedience. It's the only defense against chaos. When the plague comes, when crops die, when the world burns, belief becomes a shelter the mind cannot live without. The saints become companions, miracles become maps, and heaven becomes a promise that gives meaning to misery. You begin to see how belief was not ignorance, it was survival. No matter which century you land in, it will find you eventually. It moves silently through the cities, carried by fleas, ships, trade, and chance. The air feels different when it comes thick with fear, superstition, and smoke from hastily burned herbs. The symptoms begin small: a cough, a fever, a pain in the groin, then swelling, then delirium, then silence. When the Black Death swept through Europe in the 14th century, whole towns disappeared. Graves overflowed, priests refused last rites, and families sealed themselves inside their homes. You learn quickly not to ask questions, only to endure. Villagers hang posies of flowers to sweeten the air. Doctors wear long-nosed masks filled with herbs. Everyone blames someone: foreigners, Jews, sinners, even the stars. But in the midst of the panic, you'll also see quiet acts of mercy: a neighbor leaving bread at a doorstep, a monk tending to the dying, though he knows he will join them. If you survive, you will never again take breath for granted. You think you've seen all of medieval Europe after visiting one village, and in a way, you have. Each village is its own world, self-contained and complete. It has a blacksmith, a mill, a church, a handful of cottages, a lord's manor, and the endless fields that define its limits. News travels slower than weather. Wars might rage miles away, but unless soldiers march through, they remain only rumors. If you're a peasant, your world is no larger than the sound of the church bell. The next town is as distant as the moon. Yet, within that narrow horizon, there's an entire universe of routine, love, envy, laughter, work, and quiet endurance. People here do not dream of escape. They dream of enough grain to last until spring. Justice here is public, brutal, and strangely theatrical. Thieves are hanged in the square. Witches are paraded through town. Blasphemers are whipped before the church. But punishment is not just cruelty, it's ceremony. It reminds people of the fragile order that keeps chaos at bay. There are no police, no prisons in the modern sense. Justice is spectacle, meant to terrify, not rehabilitate. Still, behind the violence, you'll find another truth. People cling to fairness, even when it's twisted. Villagers argue in front of elders, swear oaths on relics, and trust that God sees what men cannot. For all its brutality, the system holds because everyone believes in the story that somewhere in all the fear, justice exists. Even if you never hold a sword, you will hear war. It echoes across the land, the distant thunder of hooves, the whispers of taxes rising to fund campaigns, the dread when soldiers march near. You'll see banners fluttering, armor glinting, and the hollow-eyed faces of men who have seen too much. For most people, war means hunger. It means fields burned, sons conscripted, daughters taken as spoils. The battles themselves are brief, but the wounds last for generations. Kings come and go, claiming divine right, drawing borders on maps that most villagers will never see. And through it all, life continues. Bread still bakes, bells still ring, and someone still sings while mending a net. Because in medieval Europe, peace is not the absence of war. It's the short pause between one and the next. To live here is to be constantly aware of your body. It aches, it bleeds, it hungers, it carries disease, and yet it endures. You learn to live with pain as casually as with weather. A bad back, a missing tooth, a broken nail. These are facts of existence, not complaints. And yet there's awe in how much the body can survive. Farmers lift until their hands harden like wood. Mothers carry children through winters without food. Old men still rise before dawn to milk cows. Every body becomes a story of persistence, a record of toil written in bone and muscle. It's not beauty the medieval world reveres, it's usefulness. And somehow, that gives life a different kind of dignity. The year turns not by numbers, but by holy days. Each feast, each saint's day, each fast shapes life more deeply than the months themselves. You'll find joy not in vacations, but in rhythms. Easter, harvest festivals, midsummer fires, All Souls' Night. These aren't distractions. They're anchors. They remind people that time has meaning beyond survival, that life, even hard life, follows a divine pattern. And when the church bells ring on a feast morning, and the villagers dance despite the mud and hunger, you'll see what keeps this world alive. A faith in cycles, that light always returns, that winter always ends. As the second section closes, the medieval world feels less foreign, more intimate. Its hardships are not just history, they are lessons in endurance. You've seen how people built meaning from struggle and hope from habit. You've seen how faith became a kind of strength, how even the smallest joys, a warm loaf, a shared song, a flicker of light, were victories against despair. And as you drift toward the next part of your journey, one thought lingers. If time could carry you through another century, the dawn of cities, of printing, of new empires, would you recognize yourself in the people still fighting to survive the ordinary? If you've survived long enough in medieval Europe to stop dreaming of home, you begin to notice the texture of the age. Everything here has weight. The wooden spoon, the wool tunic, the thick air that smells of smoke and sweat. Even silence feels dense. It presses on your chest like another layer of wool. You've learned how to survive, but you're still learning how to belong. Because survival here isn't only about food or warmth. It's about understanding the strange, invisible web that holds everything together. The world runs on 1,000 unspoken rules. How to greet, when to bow, where to sit, when to speak. And if you break them, not even hunger will save you. Manners, in this world, are armor. They tell people whether you're friend or foe, sinner or saint, noble or fool. Peasants bow low to lords, remove hats before priests, and never speak unless spoken to. Nobles perform their own rituals, kissing rings, offering hands, choosing the right title for the right rank. Every word, every gesture is a signpost. If you kneel at the wrong time or forget to bow before an icon, it's not just a mistake, it's a statement of rebellion. Even eating has rules. The right hand for food, never touch the knife's edge. Do not speak with your mouth full. Always cross yourself before and after meals. And while you might find these rituals exhausting, they serve a purpose. They create order in a world that has so little. Politeness is how people survive proximity, because here everyone lives close, entire families in one room, animals underfoot, neighbors always within earshot. Courtesy becomes the only space that belongs to you, a small, invisible boundary in a crowded, fragile world. At night, when you think the village is asleep, it isn't. You can still hear the low murmur of life, the hiss of a dying fire, the cry of a baby, a cow shifting in the dark, the dull ring of a bell marking another hour of vigil in the church. Silence here is never true silence. It's filled with sound that reminds you life keeps moving even when unseen. And during the day, the noise swells. Blacksmiths hammering, hens clucking, the millstones' endless grind, the rhythm of wooden wheels on mud roads, the creak of carts, the whistle of wind through thatched roofs. It's not chaotic, it's steady, like breathing. You begin to realize that this noise is comfort. It means the world is still turning. In modern life, time is kept by clocks. In medieval Europe, time is kept by work. Every moment has a task attached to it, and every task repeats with such consistency that it replaces the idea of hours. You rise with the sun not because you must, but because there is nothing else to do. You till until your body says stop. You eat when the light changes color. You sleep when darkness takes over. Work is both punishment and salvation. It feeds you, defines you, and consumes you. Even the smallest job has a sacred rhythm. Women spinning wool by firelight, monks copying manuscripts with aching wrists, children gathering herbs along the roadside. To live here is to understand that labor is not only survival, it's identity. Without work, you become invisible. You might be tempted to believe that medieval people were dirty, and in many ways they were. But their version of cleanliness was not yours. Water, especially in winter, was dangerous. Bathing too often was seen as risky. It could open the pores to illness. So people cleaned in fragments, hands, faces, feet. They changed linen more often than outer garments because they believed linen absorbs impurities. Soap was precious and harsh, made from animal fat and ash, leaving behind a faint smell of smoke and iron. Perfumes came from herbs, rosemary, lavender, sage, tucked into clothes, sewn into little pouches worn close to the skin. And while the modern traveler might wrinkle their nose, you begin to sense something else beneath the grime: resilience. They endured filth because they had to. And when you finally feel the sting of cold water on your own skin after months without a true bath, it doesn't feel like disgust. It feels like grace. Forget romance as you know it. Love in medieval Europe is quieter, slower, built from necessity. Marriage is rarely about affection. It's about property, alliances, and survival. But affection does grow in small gestures, unspoken glances, shared hardships. A woman might stitch a patch on her husband's sleeve before he goes to the field. A man might save a crust of bread for his wife when food runs low. These small acts carry the weight of vows. They are love, medieval love, stripped of poetry, but full of meaning. Even forbidden loves, those whispered between walls or over candlelight, carry immense danger. But still, they happen, proof that even in the hardest ages, the human heart refuses silence. You begin to understand the power of books in a time when few people ever touch one. In monasteries, scribes copy texts by hand, each letter drawn with reverence, each page a labor of days. Books are chained to tables, guarded like relics. Most villagers will never see one, but they still believe in their power. To them, books are not information, they are spells. If a priest reads from one, the words themselves carry divine weight. And if you travel through towns, you'll see murals, carvings, and stained glass, telling stories for those who cannot read. Because here, art is literacy, the color of saints' robes, the angle of a hand, the shape of a halo. It's strange to realize that even without words, the people here live in a world thick with meaning. A modern traveler might expect childhood to be sacred, but in medieval Europe, it's fleeting. Children are loved, but they're expected to work as soon as they can stand. A 5-year-old might scare crows from crops. A 7-year-old might tend animals or fetch water. There are few toys, few moments of pure play, yet laughter still echoes across the fields. Because every life is fragile, each child is both joy and labor. When one dies, grief comes quietly, not because it hurts less, but because it happens often. And yet, in the middle of this hard acceptance, you see tenderness everywhere. A mother tracing a cross on a child's forehead before bed, a father lifting his son to watch a procession, a lullaby sung in a language already fading. In those moments, you understand that love here is not expressed by words, it's expressed by endurance. You learn to love the sound of fire, the crackle, the sigh, the whispering warmth. It's not just comfort, it's survival. The hearth is the center of every home. It cooks food, dries clothes, gives light, and keeps spirits alive. Without it, life collapses. Even the poorest hut will have a fire pit. People guard embers like treasure, carrying coals from one house to another if a flame dies. When the air outside freezes your breath, when night falls without lamps, you realize something simple. Civilization begins wherever fire burns. If daytime belongs to people, night belongs to something else. By sunset, the village retreats indoors. The doors are barred, candles lit low. The dark beyond the threshold feels alive, full of wolves, spirits, and thieves. You hear stories whispered about creatures that roam the night, ghosts, demons, fairies, witches. And though you don't believe, part of you still feels it, that primal unease when the wind groans and a distant howl answers. Nighttime in medieval Europe is vast and heavy. The stars feel closer, the darkness thicker. You understand why prayers are longer after sunset, because in the dark, faith is the only light. In a world so full of suffering, what keeps people alive is not change, it's repetition. The same sunrise, the same work, the same prayers, the same bells. They create a rhythm strong enough to survive despair. You begin to see that hope here is not loud. It doesn't shout or demand, it whispers. It hides in routine, in the daily act of continuing despite everything. When the harvest fails, people still plant again next year. When the plague returns, they still bury the dead with care. When the world seems beyond saving, they still light candles in the dark. And you, the time traveler, begin to feel it too. A strange peace in their monotony. A realization that boredom, in this age, is not the enemy, it's salvation. Now you have lived long enough in this world to understand it not as alien, but as deeply human. You've seen their fear and their grace, their rituals and quiet joys, their acceptance of death and their defiance of it. And maybe, as you drift into the next century, the dawn of trade, discovery, and new light, you carry something from them. The wisdom that ordinary endurance is extraordinary, that sometimes surviving is the greatest act of faith. If you've lived long enough among them, the world of the Middle Ages begins to rearrange itself in your mind. The shock fades, the strangeness softens, and you start to see the rhythm beneath the noise, a pulse, slow but steady, keeping this age alive. The people around you don't think of their world as primitive. To them, it's perfectly ordered, a balance of heaven and earth, of prayer and pain. And the deeper you sink into their days, the more you realize that survival here isn't about muscle or cunning. It's about patience. It's about faith. It's about accepting that life is hard and still finding reason to rise again each morning. In the medieval mind, the world is not just matter. It breathes. It listens. It judges. Every stone, tree, and river carries meaning. If thunder rolls, it's God's voice. If a sparrow lands on your window, it brings a message. If a candle flickers during prayer, it's a warning. You realize, over time, that superstition here is not ignorance, it's intimacy. It's the belief that the world speaks back. And though you might call it superstition, it gives life texture. It turns existence into a conversation between human and divine, body and spirit, earth and heaven. If you fall sick, prepare yourself. Medicine here is equal parts ritual and pain. Doctors are rare, and when they do appear, they bring leeches, herbs, and Latin prayers. They talk of humors, black bile, yellow bile, blood and phlegm, fever, too much yellow bile, sadness, too much black. A doctor will bleed you to balance the scales, and you'll thank him even as you grow weaker. In villages, healing belongs to women, midwives, and herb wives who gather plants and whisper charms over wounds. They know things passed from mother to daughter, which leaf stops bleeding, which route eases pain, which flower hides poison. To the church, their knowledge smells of danger. To the villagers, it smells of hope. You see both truths, and when you drink a bitter infusion under the watchful gaze of a healer, you understand that belief is half the cure. In this world, loneliness can kill. Without friends, you have no help in harvest, no witness in trade, no one to speak your name when you die. Friendship is not sentimental, it's practical, sacred, and binding. To share bread is to seal a bond. To help mend a roof is to declare loyalty. You might see two men clasp forearms instead of hands. That's trust. You might hear a neighbor call another brother. Though no blood connects them, that's alliance. And when famine hits, these invisible ties are tested. Some will share until there's nothing left. Some will hoard, and that, more than any sermon, reveals who they truly are. Every meal here is a ritual. Bread is holy, literally. The church blesses it, and no crumb is wasted. Meat is rare. Fish is virtue, and the taste of sweetness, honey, fruit, or a little sugar from distant lands feels like a feast meant for kings. Salt is treasure. Spices are miracles from a world beyond imagination. A pinch of cinnamon means trade has reached the edge of Christendom. Most people eat the same thing day after day: porridge, ale, coarse bread. Yet when a festival comes, the smell of roasted meat fills the air, and for one night the world feels generous again. It's strange how food here tastes of both poverty and gratitude, how even hunger teaches reverence. You stop judging their simplicity, and you start seeing the beauty of it, the way they bow before a loaf, the way they thank the earth before eating. Because in this age, food isn't just nourishment, it's survival made sacred. You might think faith is private. Here, it's not. It's the atmosphere. The church is the heart of every town, every calendar, every law. Its bells mark your day. Its festivals mark your year. Its prayers mark your birth, your love, your death. Even if you never see a priest, the church is inescapable in how people talk, swear, trade, and judge. A farmer plowing a field might mutter, "God wills it." A widow giving bread to a beggar might whisper, "Christ sees." Every act, even mundane, echoes with eternity. And yet, beneath this faith, you notice doubt, small, quiet, human doubt. A question whispered in confession. Why do the innocent still die? Why does the plague return? But they never abandon belief. Because here, faith isn't comfort, it's infrastructure. Without it, the world collapses. Justice in the Middle Ages is not hidden behind walls. It's public, loud, and meant to teach fear. A thief in the market might lose a hand. A heretic might burn before a crowd that prays as the flames rise. Even minor crimes bring humiliation: the stocks, the pillory, the shame of being watched by everyone you know. You want to look away, but no one else does. Children watch, priests bless, bakers pause their work, because punishment to them is moral theater. It keeps order where law is weak. And yet, even in the cruelty, you sometimes see mercy, a crowd pleading for a lighter sentence, a judge sparing a widow's son. It's a strange balance. Justice shaped by fear, softened by fatigue. They believe dreams are not random. A dream of falling, pride, a dream of fire, judgment, a dream of clear water, a sign of grace. Dreams are studied like weather, discussed after Mass, feared by kings and peasants alike. If someone dreams of a crown, it's recorded in whispers. If someone dreams of a snake, people draw crosses on doorframes. You might smile until you start dreaming too. And one morning, you wake to find that the very thing you dreamed of has happened. Coincidence, you tell yourself. But in this age, coincidence doesn't exist. Everything means something. Death here is not the end. It's a neighbor who never quite leaves. Graves are shallow, reused, often close to home. Bones resurface after rain. People handle them gently, reburying them with whispered prayers. Candles are lit for souls in purgatory. Bells are rung for the recently dead. Even at dinner, they'll sometimes leave a little bread for the departed, just in case they visit. Death is not hidden, and because of that, it's less terrifying. They live beside it, talk to it, joke about it. Children grow up watching funerals as often as weddings. You begin to envy their peace with it, how they've learned to weave grief into life, rather than run from it. There are no artists here, as you know them. There are only craftsmen, painters, stonemasons, glassmakers, who work not for fame, but for devotion. A cathedral window is signed not with a name, but with silence. A sculptor might labor a lifetime carving saints and never see the roof finished. But there's beauty in that anonymity. Art here isn't about expression, it's about transcendence. Every brushstroke, every chisel mark is an act of prayer. To make something beautiful is to honor the divine, and in that, you glimpse something humbling, a civilization where art serves eternity, not ego. You've lived here long enough now to stop judging the dirt, the faith, the fear, the pain, because beneath it all, you see a quiet strength, a collective endurance. People who never expect comfort, yet still find meaning in toil. People who die young, but live fully in every season they get. Their world is small, yes, but within it, they've built something immense, a culture of patience. And when you finally lie awake one night, hearing the soft chant of monks drifting through cold air, the bark of a distant dog, the rustle of leaves, you realize you've stopped feeling like a traveler. You belong, if only for a moment, to their rhythm. And that is how you learn the quiet truth of medieval Europe, that life here was never about greatness or glory. It was about endurance, sacred, stubborn endurance. When the old world crumbles, plague, rebellion, and the first glimmers of modern thought, you've lived here long enough now to sense it, a shift in the air, subtle but unstoppable. The medieval world, with all its faith and order, is beginning to crack. It starts quietly. The harvests fail more often. The winters linger too long. The old certainties, God's justice, the king's authority, the priest's word, begin to sound less convincing. And beneath the hum of daily life, you hear whispers of something that has no name yet change. The Middle Ages were built on repetition, the same prayers, the same laws, the same rituals, century after century. It worked for a time. But every system, no matter how divine it seems, eventually runs out of breath. By the 14th century, kings are broke, nobles are restless, and peasants are tired. The church owns nearly a third of Europe's land. Yet even its coffers tremble under the weight of endless wars and grand cathedrals. Documents begin to circulate, quietly at first, complaints about corruption, questions about tithes, doubts about miracles. And though the church crushes these voices when it can, the questions keep multiplying like weeds through stone. If you walk through the great cities, Paris, Florence, London, you feel it everywhere. The old world is fraying, but it doesn't know how to stop pretending. Then comes the Black Death. No sermon prepares you for it. No prayer stops it. No wall, no title, no wealth can keep it out. It moves like wind, invisible, merciless, and everywhere. You smell it before you see it. The stench of decay that lingers even in churchyards. Carts roll through the streets, piled with the dead. Men hold herbs to their noses, convinced bad air brings the sickness. Doctors in long-beaked masks mumble Latin charms, though they know as little as the farmers they treat. But something extraordinary happens beneath the horror. When death no longer respects rank, neither do the living. Kings flee their palaces. Priests die beside peasants. And the survivors, the poor, the forgotten, inherit the empty houses, the abandoned fields, the tools of the dead. For a moment, the hierarchy collapses. And for the first time in centuries, ordinary people taste something dangerously new: freedom. It's not rebellion yet, not quite. But the idea has been planted. After the plague, Europe is half empty. Villages vanish. Roads go quiet. Entire families are erased from memory, their names swallowed by the earth. And yet, somehow, life returns. Crops are planted again. Bells ring again. Children are born small, fragile replacements for a lost generation. You'd think despair would win, but humans are stubborn creatures. They keep going, even when they don't know why. Laborers, once cheap, are now precious. The survivors demand wages, and for the first time, they get them. Fields are plowed for profit, not duty. And in this fragile rebirth, the old system trembles once more. The nobles grumble. The priests preach submission. But the peasants have seen too much death to fear anyone now. It begins in whispers, in taverns, in fields, in prayers that sound too much like protest. In England, 1381, the whispers turn to fire. Peasants march toward London, led by men with nothing to lose. They demand fair pay, an end to serfdom, justice that answers to God rather than gold. They carry sticks and scythes, and yet, for a few trembling weeks, the mighty flinch. Kings and lords promise mercy, then break their word. Leaders like Wat Tyler die with swords in their bellies, and the rebellion collapses. But something irreversible has shifted, because even in defeat, the idea survives. The thought that those who till the soil deserve more than chains. That thought will echo through centuries, through revolutions, through reforms, through the slow awakening of what we now call human rights. You can kill a man, but not a question. And by the 15th century, Europe is full of questions. Monks begin copying not only scripture, but ancient Greek philosophy. A few scholars rediscover forgotten names: Aristotle, Plato, Galen, in dusty cloisters. They argue that the earth might move, that numbers have beauty, that the stars might be more than symbols in the Bible. It's dangerous work. Many stay silent. Some vanish into prisons or flames. But the pattern is clear. The human mind, long chained by certainty, has begun to stir. And once it wakes, it never truly sleeps again. You can walk across all of medieval Europe and never see anything as miraculous as what happens in Mainz, Germany. Around 1450, a man named Johannes Gutenberg builds a machine that will break the monopoly of memory itself: the printing press. Until now, every book was a treasure, copied by hand, letter by letter, sometimes over years. Only the church and the rich could afford them. But with Gutenberg's invention, words begin to multiply like seeds on the wind. Ideas that once lived only in monasteries now travel across borders. Within decades, entire nations are reading. And once people can read, they begin to think for themselves. No king, no priest, no empire can ever truly control that again. The 15th century brings sails, white, full, and endless. Explorers chase the horizon, convinced they can reach the edge of the world. What they find instead are continents unknown to Europe. We call it discovery, though much of it is conquest, theft, and tragedy. But still, for the first time, humanity sees itself as global. The medieval wall between Christendom and the rest begins to crumble. You stand on a harbor in Lisbon and watch a ship vanish into the mist, and you know the world you entered, with its candlelight and cobblestones, is ending. The age that follows will call itself the Renaissance. The word means rebirth, but it's really a kind of forgetting. The old beliefs, saints in wells, ghosts in forests, miracles in the rain, begin to retreat before reason. The medieval mind, which saw meaning in every flicker of light, gives way to the scientist's gaze, precise, curious, skeptical. You feel the loss, quietly. The mystery of the world grows smaller, even as knowledge grows vast. Yet there's beauty in the trade, a new kind of wonder, found not in prayer, but in discovery. Human hands begin to draw the world as it truly is, its muscles, its stars, its motion, its laws, and in that, something eternal survives, the need to understand. History likes to draw lines to say one era stops and another begins. But the truth is slower, messier. The Middle Ages don't end in a year or even a century. They fade like twilight giving way to dawn. You still see them in the habits that remain, in the ring of church bells, in the stories told at night, in the quiet, instinctive prayers whispered before sleep. Even in our modern cities, echoes of that world linger in our architecture, our superstitions, our need for ritual. The Middle Ages taught us endurance, faith, and community, lessons we keep forgetting and relearning over and over again. As your time in this world draws to an end, you notice how silent it truly is. No engines, no clocks, no hum of electricity, only wind, footsteps, and the low murmur of people working, praying, surviving. You've grown used to the smell of smoke, the texture of wool, the sound of bells cutting through morning fog. And when you finally prepare to leave, stepping back toward your own century, you hesitate. Because, despite the hardship, this world feels alive in a way yours may never again. You realize that boredom here is sacred, that slowness, silence, and repetition were not flaws, but the rhythm of being human before the noise began. If you ever time travel to medieval Europe, or even just imagine it before sleep, remember this: you are not visiting a primitive time. You are visiting the foundation of everything that came after. Every tool, every law, every idea we now take for granted was once shaped in candlelight by people who never knew your name but made your world possible. And though centuries have passed, their endurance still whispers in your veins. The past is not gone. It's only sleeping, and when you listen quietly enough, you can still hear it breathing. So, now that you've seen what it truly meant to live in the Middle Ages, to wake with the church bells, to work until sunset, to eat bread that was more grit than grain, take a slow breath. You've walked through 1,000 years of dust and prayer. You've stood in the smoke of plague fires and heard the hum of distant choirs. You've learned what people feared, what they loved, and how they somehow kept going through centuries that never seemed to change. And maybe, as you return to your own quiet room tonight, you'll feel a strange kind of peace, knowing that boredom, exhaustion, and repetition once built entire civilizations. Because that's the secret of the medieval world. Beneath all its silence and struggle was a steady heartbeat, proof that even in the slowest centuries, life never stopped moving forward. So let your mind drift there, one last time, back to the stone castles and muddy roads, to the cold air that smelled of wood smoke and bread. The world is still turning. The bells are still ringing somewhere in the distance. And as you drift toward sleep, remember, the story doesn't end here. Because next time, we'll go even further. A darker, stranger, more forgotten corner of history waits for us. One filled with mysteries the Middle Ages left behind, and the quiet brilliance of those who dared to challenge them. Until then, keep your candle burning low and stay curious. Good night.